Hey everyone, it's Classic DM, and this episode is going to focus on getting prepared to run your adventure. Someone had sent me a message saying, how do you set up your DM screen? And I really wanted to kind of explain how I set stuff up. Not that it's the best way possible, because I actually don't even use a DM screen. But what I do is I try to get a lot of information prepared ahead of time that's going to make things faster in combat. And so, well, you know, why not just share that with other folks, and maybe share some of your ideas of what kind of stuff works really cool for you too. And we'll just kind of dig right into it. So one of the first things I like to do before I do anything else at all, right? Let's just get our screens going here. There we go. Let's get this baby right here, and let's get our little player panel open. Okay, let's just use any module, right? So we got World of Greyhawk here. We got our tokens. We got our classical games. Yay! One of the first things I do is say you're going to run just in a store-bought campaign, whether it's one of the big hardback books from Wizards of the Coast, or whatever you're going to play. You need to just get a Xerox copy of it. Just make a copy of your original version or whatever you can, so you can make some notes, and that's really, really important. In fact, if I go through my old Xerox copies from a long time ago, I've written all over these things, and I think that's really important. I don't know, a lot of people are doing everything digital. There's nothing wrong with that. I have digital stuff on my phone and tablet and laptop as well. But I think it's really important for you to have something you can write rough notes on, and that's not a separate document. So, you know, when they redid Tomb of Horrors, I've got notes all through this thing that I did, and White Plume Mountain, and Ghost Tower Inverness, and Hidden Tron and Tomoeshan. Tomoeshan is one of my all-time favorites. I'll have to do a special playlist one day just on how brilliant this module is. This module was done before the first Indiana Jones movie, if you can believe that. In fact, we'll just put it right here. So let's just use our Glacial Rift or Frost Giant Jarl as a fundamental backdrop, and let's just use two enemies, Hill Giants and Frost Giants. So when you get this big campaign, obviously the most silliest thing possible you need to do is read it. And when you're reading through it, one of the things you really should do is we'll get another close-up camera done on this so you can see a little bit better. One of the things you really need to do is be able to make notes on it as you're reading it. In fact, we'll just slide this over here like this. Give me just half a second. Not that one. Let's move this one here. Let's put this over here. And we're going to bump this up a notch. There we go. And I'll make this a little bigger so you can see a little bit better. There we go. And that way I can turn things around more towards you. Let's get these kids out of the way. It sounds kind of silly. It's very old school. It's like studying for the exam kind of vibe, but you really do want something that you can make notes on. And it's important so you can glean out from the descriptions what's really, really of merit, what's really, really of use to you, and what also piques your interest more than anything else. So, for example, in the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, you know, when you're reading through this very introductory thing, there's elements that I'm outlining that are important to me. Let me just give you a quick example of that, right? Two icy ledges along either face of the rift. Each slope slightly downward, occasional high steps. So when I was drawing out the maps for that whole adventure in that module, I need to think to myself, like, okay, what you're talking about here, they've got this classic picture, right? Classic picture that looks like that. Sort of kind of looks like the way it really does. And so when you're thinking about that from a side view, so you've got, here's a heroic character standing here with a sword in hand. You got this sloping kind of a cliff going up like this, and here's all the sloping edges. Maybe there's a cave up here, right? Cave big enough for a big frost giant dude standing up here. So this sloping stuff is happening all over. That I would call that this type of area happening maybe about right here. This thing right here, okay? So you really need to kind of read through that, and then you need to have the map on hand so you can say to yourself, okay, where's that really happening here? So you have things like the little crappy little picture done right here, which isn't too awesome, and then you look at the map, you're like, okay, this is sloping down like this. So as a former architect, that kind of stuff for me is not difficult to figure out, but for someone who doesn't really think in incredible amounts of topography and detail, that can be very tricky. So be sure you have a really good understanding of what the geometric changes are in the map, and think to yourself, like, okay, this is one thing about this map that's actually quite confusing that people don't catch. This is the rift oriented with north to the top, right? And this is the level below. Now if you read this carefully, right, this says up to level 1 and this is down to level 2. So technically what's happening for real here is this is not level 1 leading down to level 2. They're kind of like this. So it's like one long linear map. So the upper rift is up here, right up here, and then it slopes down to underneath it. So in reality, you've got this really, really deep rift happening way up here, and you've got this lower level kind of down below it, kind of like this. It almost reminds me of the Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-shan, where you read like the temple has like the uppermost level and lowermost level. But when we look at these dungeons, especially if you look at the Temple of Elemental Evil, which is one of my most despised modules ever, you just think that, oh, level 1 and level 2 and level 3, and they're all perfectly on top of each other like an office building. That's not really how it is. So be sure, the only way you're going to pick that kind of stuff up is if you really kind of break down and read through the dirty details, because back in the day when these guys made these things, you know, these modules, they were like, what, $4.99 or $6.99? They're traditional printed method. This is back when we're taking tests in middle school and using Ditto paper and things like that. This is not Xerox machine era stuff. This is actual printing, offset printing. So they only have a very limited amount of space to do this stuff. And so in less than 20 pages, they've got, you know, 150 to 200 hours of gameplay happening. I mean, page 8 is where the Expedition of the Glacial Rift of Frost Giant Jarl ends. Page 8. It doesn't even start the description to page 2. So you got 6 pages of content here. That's 2 levels of this massive, incredible, huge dungeon. So as silly as it sounds, repeating myself a little bit here, you need to read through the details and using a pen or whatever else you want to do, highlight the stuff that really jumps up to you that you may not really get very well, or that you may not understand. Like, for example, there's an element here in the beginning, start. It is assumed that the party has either followed a map obtained at the steading of the Hill Giant Chief, which is G1, or used the magical chain found there. So you're already making references to the previous module. I had a whole episode where we call it the Infinity Chain, where we created this kind of a magical drow braided steel hose kind of infinity shape, because it describes it in the steading of the Hill Giant Chief, like this Mobius strip type of vibe, and it had all these like little rivets on it and things like this, and little spikes that would stick out like spider fangs when you used it, and you would set it down this altar, and it would be a little pile, and you set it down and go whoosh, and just change it to this magical formation, saying the 8 stars and the magical powers are aligned now, and now when you stand next to it, you'll be teleported. Something right out of Stargate or something, right? So one word, chain, is how you actually get to this map. So, you know, you need to be able to understand how all those things connect, because the players really want you as a dungeon master to truly understand, like, how do we get here, what's going on. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, well, you guys are in another town somewhere, I'll just pull up a map, I don't really have any motivation for you to go there, and you've got a rumor that there's a terrible rift in the hell furnaces. Like, that's not much of a hook. So the hooks are all right here for you for plot lines. You're just going to need to expand upon them based on what's already here. So when you're looking through the first few pages of these old school first edition things, they're so cheap to get now. There's an incredible amount of there's almost like blurbs at the back of a book. It's like going to IMDb and reading the description of a movie, or going to Netflix, you're reading about this series, like, you know, Viking warrior fights to death to save his kingdom. There's a lot more to it than just those 3 sentences. So read through all these things in details, and when you get your Xerox copy or whatever you made at FedEx office or something, you can write all over it. You don't have to worry about ruining something. If you have a PDF, this is what you're gonna do if you have a PDF, right? Let me just turn this camera here off. You're gonna have a PDF, and you're gonna do this. Let's turn these player panels on here. And let's just move this camera up a notch. And we'll just hide this real quick. Okay, here we go. So, you know, this is the PDF, right? So you start off with the first page, it's got the descriptions I was talking about. You'll start reading through this, and it's just words on a page. It's like 1 or 2 occasional pictures. And you just start kind of drifting off to sleep. You'll realize when this stuff was first done that those 2 pages there are really kind of a spread, you know, picture like this. They're kind of designed to be seen like this when you first see it, but when you're looking at the PDF, it doesn't come off that way. So when you're looking at these old modules and the 2 pages open up, there's an incredible amount of information here that's talking about stuff on this page that's also referencing things on this page. So one of the first things you can do, besides trying to pick up the subtle details, like here's another example, the Emissary Cave on level 2. In the Emissary Cave on level 2, there's a huge amount of detail given to this small iron casket holds a gift to the Lord of the Ogre Magi, a trick box with 18 plates of platinum, blah, 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 inside of this magical hole. This is a magical trick box. Look how much real estate is spent in this module description to give you everything you need to know as a DM that much real estate is spent out of this total page, okay, like 1/6 of a page to describe how to handle a box that your party may never find. They may never even find it. If they're an impatient killing machine, like a lot of my games are, they may miss that thing completely in its entirety. So besides getting the details and understanding the geometry of the map, understanding some of the subtle details of where things are laid out, another thing I encourage you to do is with your map on hand, let's just go ahead and pull the upstairs map up. I will go through the map and I will write on the map itself what's there. So 4 sleeping ogres, 12, 8 frost giants. I have 5 ice toads here. Here's where the block of ice are. Here's the bones. This is the special drop down. This is 3 fire giant visitors. There's 4 stone giants here. What do I got written here? Frozen meat. Frost giant, 6 giants here. 4 giants, 2 snow leopards, misting lava, steam vents, yetis, and blah, 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 blah. I have winter wolves here at 27. I knew myself I was going to do something really cool with 28 and 29 and change it around some. You can see where I've highlighted the passageway that slopes down so I would understand all this stuff. Because in the back of my mind, my players went through this stuff and they went this way and they weaved down this way and this way. In fact, we can pull that up real quick and let you show you what the players actually did. So from their original storyline, they discovered a map that kind of looked like this. They had this map of the upper and lower caverns. And once they had that map, they realized what areas they had and had not discovered. Like, this is some of the props we gave them to kind of get them here. Once they got here, they had like a drow letter and all this kind of fun stuff. So they had this map of the rift, which is really clunky with this like gray dwarf writing all over it, right? So, but they never even went anywhere near this whole area. In fact, we had people vote on where to go to next when they had this map. So don't be afraid to write all over the whole thing, because what this is going to do, just like studying for an exam in college or whatever, is it's going to familiarize you with the things that are tricky in this map, okay? So we have situations like this, like Cave Guard Complex. Giants here are always alert. Okay, right off the bat. That means there aren't guys looking the wrong way. Maybe 2 guys posted on duty. 1 guy may be sitting at a table, but he's facing the doorway. So these guys are always alert. That means they might hear something down the hall. So if you've got players in the adjacent area banging around or having a melee combat and the guy's in plate mail or someone's using a shield, they're probably going to hear that. You're going to need to train those guys out to come be reinforcements for a battle up a little bit. You'll only pick that kind of detail up if you really read this while you're also looking at the map. So that's one other thing about the old dungeons that people kind of forget about, is they think themselves, oh yeah, every single encounter in the whole dungeon is a self-compartmentalized instance of adventure that's not even related to each other. So when the party is in this room here, which is where the ice blocks are, whatever's happening in 3 and 4, they're not really going to hear anything at 2, but if someone's fighting in 3, they can hear something in 4. And if there's someone's fighting in 6, you might hear the sound echoing down this passageway to 1. So some of these things are isolated, but some of these things are relatively connected. So like if you're in area 7, okay, you can see that the connection down to 8 is just a bunch of pillars in a way. So you need to know what 7 and 8 are. Well, if you see my map here, I wrote 4 sleeping ogres at 7 where the players first come in, but as they move their way down, there's 12 ogres in this room. They're all actively doing stuff, but there's no backdoor connection to where these 8 frost giants are. So if there's a grand melee happening in here, it's all going to be ogre oriented. So players might come in this. Remember, this stuff's going to be dark too. It could be the time of day. If it's night, this cave is pretty deep. You could have a thief or assassin or a monk hiding in shadows creeping around here and decide to set up a kill on these 4 ogres. And the moment they start having a melee, you've got 12 ogres come whipping through these passageways, and you need to understand, well, if they do come whipping through the passageways, which way are they going to come through? So you have to kind of project in your mind ahead of time how it's probably going to unfold. What are the players probably going to do when they've come to this area and they see these sleeping ogres? If you just read it and remember that, oh yeah, you'll have the melee, you'll start doing the fight, you do the rolls for the hiding in shadows and moving silently, and they'll successfully coup de grace the 4 sleeping ogres, and then you're forgotten to wake up these 12 ogres here, and they'll be looting for treasure, and then someone will take a step and walk in this room here, and there's 12 ogres sitting around gambling. You're like, why weren't they alerted by this? Each one of these squares is 10 feet. So you got 10, 20, 30 feet. That's only 10 yards in a football game. Okay? This is only 10 yards of distance. Someone can run that far in 2 seconds. So they would easily hear that distance. This is the size of someone's garage, okay? This little square right here is the size of a 2-car garage. Very easy to hear across the width of a 2-car garage. So understanding how sound propagates, where the lighting is going to be, where the enemies are, and can they hear what's going on the next passageway. Thinking about, like, how does sound propagate down this hallway? Is it pretty far? It's pretty far. If someone were to stand at one end of the football field and it's in the early morning, and they had a Coke can and they were to drop it on the ground on top of a concrete block, you probably would hear it all the way there in the football stadium. And that's an environment where there's no echoing. But if it was a long hallway, like in a college dormitory or in a long office building, and this was a hard floor and someone dropped a Coke can, the sound would echo and reverberate down the whole hallway. So sound is another key element to think of. So as you're reading through and making notations, you're pulling out where the enemies are. Okay, I've got frost giants here, 4 of them, hit points 59, 50, 45, and 40. I can start making what I call combat sheets for that. But what I'm really doing on my first walkthrough is really getting a handle on the geometric relationships and the layout of the dungeon itself, so I can make sure I run it in the most compelling way possible. Because nothing more exciting than to have someone have the world react appropriately to what's going on. So you heard me mention combat sheets. What do we do? So I don't use a big DM screen to conceal everything because I've got paper and I can just turn a page and no one can really read it. I mean, can you read what this says? No, you can't. That's about how far away you are or you're sitting at the table. So we'll just turn this other camera on real quick here so you can see this other stuff here. Let's turn this one on as well. Okay, so what I do is I get these things. So I've posted this in Facebook groups before. This is probably from Staples, I'm not mistaken. Yeah, here it is. So these are like Post-it notes that have a little stupid ruling on it, and they work really, really good. So what I'll usually do is I'll say, okay, I've got a room here. What were we talking about a moment? A room with 12 ogres. So I have, let's just say it's 12 frost giants. 12 frost giants. The first thing I'll do in D&D in the first edition, I need to know what their hit dice is. So if you haven't remembered to look that up ahead of time, you may want to go through and say, okay, let me just remind myself what these guys' hit points are. I know what their hit dice are. Let's just move this over here real quick. So the typical frost giant, he's like armor class 4, hit dice 10 plus 1 to 4. So let's just make it an even 11. Just keep it simple. There's no reason to make it 10 plus 4. And they're going to have AC 4. They're wearing like chainmail and things of that nature. If you don't remember their frost resistances, you might want to look that kind of stuff up too. You need to kind of understand how much damage output they're going to do. So in this kind of situation here, they say their damage per attack is 4 to 24, or they have special damage for hurling rocks, and even describes in the description what they're going to do. A lot of times what I do is I modify the damage of the monsters to be what I think is going to be interesting. Like I may give them massive two-handed axes that hit for 4d6 or something. So say I decide they have these massive, huge battle axes that do 4d6, which is 4 to 24 points of damage. And I'll call them two-handed battle axe, right? And I write that down there. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I'll just jot down their hit points next to each one. And that's my room. I mean, like room 15 here, right? And I keep that to myself, because what's going to happen is when we're actually playing the adventure itself, I need to be able to pull these things out, which is a good reason for me to keep them closer at hand than I have them right now. Let's see, where do we have these things at? Have I set them down somewhere? Now set them down in the wrong place, so I'm trying to do this. Where did I put those things down at? I don't see them. So what I can do then, when you're having the combat, you can say these guys all had 58, 55 health, 54 health, 48 health, and as they're taking damage, you can keep track of which one is which. So we have a combat situation where here's a guy here, here's one here, here's one here, this character is fighting these ones here. You need to keep track of their health bar, health numbers. You say to yourself, okay, this guy's number 1, this guy's number 1, this guy's number 2, and as you start doing damage to you and damage to the player, you can keep track and start ticking this off. This guy's down to 50, or this guy's down to 40, and then when he's dead, I can just put an X through it and call him dead. So in the whole combat encounter, I have this little like cheat sheet that I can put on the board, right, and keep track of what the health of the enemy is at any time. So these things come in really big and handy. I don't know where this one says here, Highland, Staples. As you can see, you can probably get these things pretty much wherever you want. There's nothing about them that's magical. Let's just bring this down here like that. Okay, so these things, I can't tell you enough how useful these things are. And what you can do is you can prepare that stuff way in advance. In fact, let me set this headset down, see if I can find the ones I did before. I had them somewhere. So this is just a legacy kind of situation where I have these guys, I used them before. In fact, I'm going to slide this back over here, right? So This is a huge stack of the lower level of the Glacial Rift or Frost Giant Jarl. So I'll have, here's a situation where I had 9 local Frost Giants, and I use that as a determination for myself to basically say that, like, these are guys that live here. They weren't visitors. They had a lot of ambassadors and visitors at the wassail happening. I have their hit dice. I'll have their armor class. I'll have their damage. As the fight was happening, I'm ticking off their health and marking them down as dead, so I can, at a glance, can tell who took the most damage and who got killed. This is, and here's a situation where there were 6 hill giants that were in the middle of a fight where we stopped the game session. I also do this for players, and I keep track of this myself. It's something that's okay for you to do, and have don't have the players have to keep track of their health privately on their own character sheet. They can have a character sheet that they never write on ever, so the character sheet stays beautiful. You can make one of these for their health, and you can also have one of these that has their roll to hit numbers and their armor class and things like that. So eventually you'll get to a situation where you know what the hit armor class 0 is going to be for these hill giants, which is 12, and you may know what Mercedes roll to hit 0 is, and Zoller's roll to hit 0 is, and you can just modify the number up and down as you're playing. Just hit AC 4, you're going to just add 4 for the player, etc., etc. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll keep the player health bar numbers up like this, and I will keep the hill giant numbers up like that too, so everyone can see it, so everyone can see the accounting that's going on during the fight. This kind of stuff here, once the fights start, I'll just run the combat without having to have anything special. I don't need to look at a monster manual. I don't need to look into the description of the room anymore. I can briefly look at the room before the fight happens. I say, okay, when these guys get done killing these 5 ogre magi, I gotta remember about this little box that's in here that I made notes on. So I'll go back and look at this after the fight's finished, and then figure out what I need to do to handle running that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that I like to do that I think works really, 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 really well. So let's do one other quick thing here. Let me just give you a quick example of something else that's super important. And I'm going to switch boards real quick. So I like to make my own battle maps, even though they're just kind of chicken scratch, little rough magic marker Sharpie type things on tracing paper, bumwad architectural sketch paper. That gives me a grid that I can work on. I have this glass I can put all the enemies on. So if I have a situation where I've got a big battle happening, everything's on a 1-inch grid, and everyone can move their miniatures around, they can see what's happening, and the battle can take place, etc. So one thing that's really important I found to keep the action moving quickly is to know these numbers here on the combat saving throw tables in the back of your mind, because you're going to have to adjust enemies up and down based upon party strength. I know this party really, really well because I created them, right? Because for the show, they're all fictitious characters. They're not someone that lives down the street named Johnny that's running these characters. So for you as a DM, you may have a group of players, one player, you may never play with them before. You should have a copy of their character sheets, right? You should know what they got. You should know what they have at their disposal. You shouldn't really be running something without knowing what they can and can't do as players. I'm just going to slide this over here real quick. Once you have their once you know their numbers and you know what their AC numbers are, you know how to modify combat to make it more challenging for them, right? You don't have to worry about trying to, let's put this down here like this. Sorry, I'm fidgeting. Like, for example, okay, let's just move this out of the way. Vrinjar. Now, these are epic characters. Vrinjar's armor class is -2. He's pretty hard to hit. All the Frost Giant guys, let's just pull up one of the sheets here where we've got this Frost Giant. These guys are AC 4, okay? To hit AC 0, they only need a 10. So you can do the math in your head. If this guy only needs a 10 to hit Vrinjar, if he was AC 0, it's going to be 2 numbers harder for him to hit him at AC -2. That means he needs a 12 or higher. So this guy takes a swing at him, 12 or higher is going to hit. That's an 8. He misses completely. So just by having to hit AC 0, yes, everyone complains and doesn't like the THACO system. It still works in first edition. It's fast. The number tables are changed a little bit. The numbers I pull from the actual Dungeon Master's Guide screen itself, which is from these combat saving throw tables made for the players, which are these right here, which are by class. So you can see that a base assassin here, you look at the top left, it's clerics, druids, and monks. The top right is magic users and illusionists. The bottom left is fighters, paladins, rangers, and bards, which is the best one. And the lower right is the attack matrix for thieves and assassins. So, what was Vrinjar again, if I can even remember? Level 11 assassin. So level 11 assassin is between this bracket here, level 9 to 12. To hit AC 0, he needs a 16, right? That's not very good. That's actually a pretty high number. So all the bonuses he has to hit are from his magical weapons and things of that nature. So we look at his character sheet, try to pre-calculate that stuff as much as humanly possible to see what his to hit AC 0 is. So his to hit AC 0 is 12 because he has a +4 weapon in his hand. That's not awesome. That's thieves and assassins for you in first edition. They're not grand melee machines. If you look at a fighter, like let's just take Mercedes real quick, she only needs a 6. And the reason why she needs a 6, this is calculated after looking at the DM screen. So if you look down here, this area down here where the mouse is moving around, if you look at a fighter, you know, Mercedes, what is she? She's level 12 lawful neutral fighter. Level 12 fighter, that's this column right here. It says level 11 and 12 to hit AC 0. 11 and 12 is only a 10. Okay, so 50% of the time, if it was her, where is she? She's hiding somewhere. Here she is. If she's trying to hit this guy, the fighter's designed to be able to go toe-to-toe. Her armor class isn't really even better that much than the rogues. So not the rogue, but the assassin. The assassin and the fighter side by side had the same AC. If they didn't have anything but normal weapons, their roll to hit number, the base one for the assassin would be, what was that said, a 14 or something, or is it a 16? And the fighter's number was a 10. That's a huge difference. That's like 50% versus what, 75% chance to hit or miss. 50% of the time the fighter's going to hit. Only 25% of the time is the thief or the assassin going to hit. So knowing those kind of numbers, those numbers don't change much. So the party's ability to hit things versus the party's ability to not get hit versus the party's ability to stay alive and have enough hit points to last the duration gives you a sense of like how much stuff you can throw at them. So for example, all these frost giants that we use in these combat encounters, they're all AC 4. They're not really that hard to hit, but they hit really hard. So people like the the illusionist and the monk, who get hit pretty easily, if they get 2 of them on them, they're going to be in serious trouble. So that would change the whole dynamic layout of how the other characters in the party are going to work and survive. So as a dungeon master, you need to kind of keep in mind of what the hit AC 0 is for every single one of your players, what the armor class every single one of your players is, what the hit AC 0 based on hit dice of all the monsters is going to be, and then how much damage they do, because you're going to be rolling to hit numbers and you're going to be rolling damage numbers a lot, and you're going to have to keep track of it. And keeping track of it afterwards is not something you want to mentally keep track of at all. You want to have that written down somewhere, and these little sheets work great. So in summary, I use one for the players. This is one for enemies. Oops. This is one for enemies. So all the players playing could see this. All the players seeing the enemies can see it as well. I would never put one on the table though if they or an enemy that was concealed or hidden or invisible or something. You don't want to give that away. So when the players are having the fight, they can actually see the health number of some of the enemies. And I think that's okay, because if you're having a grand melee or nasty battle, you'll be able to see how cut up and bloodied and bruised and battered and limping and frozen and electrocuted and burned and smoldering and singed and everything else these guys are. You can kind of look at these guys and tell how hurt they are. Unlike in a massively multiplayer RPG, when you look at an enemy, he's either 100% health or 0, and there's no pain skins or anything. So in D&D, these characters are going to have a good sense that this guy's like 10% health left. He's only got like 20 hit points left. A lot of times those types of things will help the players decide who to tactically shift to. For example, if this guy is not damaged at all and she just got nailed for half her life and this guy only has 10% life yet left, the fighter might swing over here and finish this guy off, even if it provoked an attack of opportunity, which really isn't even a rule in first edition, though I like to use it anyway. She doesn't mind taking a hit from this guy to save this girl's life, and she might be trying to get a heal off on her anyway. So having these little notepad things, like I mentioned before, you can probably get them anywhere. They have a cool little sticky thing at the top. This whole section here at the top is sticky. Works really, really well. It's just at the top, so it's just this little section right through here. So just this little section up through here is all the sticky stuff right through here. So it allows you to stack them on top of each other. Those work really, 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 really good. So as you can see, if you just take a little bit of time and make some Xerox copies of your module, and you don't need the whole thing. That's one thing about the new printed hardback thing I'm kind of awkward to work with, because you're gonna have a tough time getting a copy of that. You have to buy the PDF, and if you're trying to do all this can you imagine trying to hold an iPad in your hand and keep flipping back and forth and trying to find it? Just would be good for the initial read through by yourself, but you're going to have something like this, and then inside of it you could have all of the damage sheets for all the combat encounters. They're this big. Fold this thing up, put it in a folder, take it to the table. All you gotta do is fill this, no one can see it. You don't really need much more to that. So the more familiar you are with what the combat encounters are and what's gonna actually happen during those encounters, and you got the numbers and the bookkeeping stuff at your disposal, you're gonna be much, much better off. And then you can focus on the things that are really, really intriguing, like, okay, just take an example here. So here's this room with all these torches are illuminated. And you know I'm a big fan of smoke, right? Here's smoke trails that are all going up to a hole in the ceiling. This is a hole in the ceiling. So all this smoke is being drifted up from these torches up to the top, like some kind of Thulsa Doom Conan type of a thing. These torches are all snuffed out. They're not doing anything. And this party comes walking through the hallway. So you got the fighter. You have Zolars, the fighter. The assassin goes and hides in shadows with the Elefantisi monk. She comes around here, investigates this curtain. He goes around here. Illusionist and cleric and druid are perhaps in the back. They walk in the front door and they see there's maybe a hill giant standing here and another hill giant standing here, maybe facing him. They're talking to each other, and another hill giant supposedly talking to this guy here. Now, in reality, if you're playing a computer game, you know, the light source from this torch is probably going to go only to about here. And light torch from this horse is going to, is going to here. So you have this kind of like dark, and really deep shadows in here. And the players are going to know when you put these things down on the table that their line of sight probably isn't really going to see this guy. But the moment the monk comes here and sees that, she's seen it. You can, you know, it's easy for her to like use hand signals and relate to him that she sees like one. I mean, the United States military uses tons of hand signals. I think it's over 100, 240 hand signals to use in combat for people to communicate to each other. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to reveal the fog of war along the way. It's okay for them to see things that are pretty clearly visible. Even though this guy's at the end of the dungeon, these guys aren't running around using infravision to see all the time. They're going to be standing somewhere that's illuminated. I mean, there's torches happening here. They can see quite well. They have shadows that are casting like this from the light sources, right? So even when these guys are moving around, there's shadows creeping up the wall and all kinds of business. So when you're coming into this space and you're working out these kind of details, what's really important is the things I just talked about. The lighting, the sound, the hole in the ceiling, how far the room is, what these two guys are actually doing. What are they doing? Is someone patrolling back and forth and turn their back and walk back this way? Are you guys able to slip behind these columns without being spotted, without making any noise, which feels kind of dramatic? That's more important for the gameplay than you fumbling through the module and reading to the players that a Hugh Ivory throne stands in the middle of the room with a hole in the ceiling. Like, that doesn't really help bring it alive. So use the map to your advantage to describe what they see. Embellish things like, what's the detail of this tapestry? You know, what's happening on this tapestry here when they get to it? What's this painting thing mounted on the wall here and over here? Is it these huge, massive shields? Is this a tapestry of some drow sacrifice that's happening that's going to connect the hill giants to the drow? What are these columns made out of? Are these made out of adamantite that are stacked? Or are they just old chiseled stone, look like they're worked by dwarves? Is the floor got this stone patterned on it, this chipped up stone from a long time ago? These torches are in sconces. Are they just little iron rusty things? Are they some elegant spider type of sconce holding up the torch itself? This UFC ring that we used in another conversation about movement and combat, is that inlaid with ivory? Is that marble tiles? Is it some kind of spiral galaxy pattern you might see from some astronomy program? Like, all these subtle details are beautiful things that you can do to help bring the level and bring the environment alive for your players that will change their behavior when they're playing through the space. And you won't be able to do any of that if you're spending your time playing bookkeeper. All right, so that's basically the whole idea behind all this. I hope that helps you out. So I don't really use a Dungeon Master screen. I take just the information I need for the hit dice, the armor class, the damage output for the monsters, and obviously the roll to hit AC 0 and the armor class and the damage output for the players. And I focus more on what the environmental context is of the situation to create a dramatic situation for the players to go and just get themselves involved in. Because that, to me, is where the real fun happens. Watching these players figure out what their approach is going to be. The monk goes too far, gets spotted. This guy comes running down the hallway. Everyone reacts, freaks out. I mean, that's where all the drama happens. That's where your game becomes like a movie. And that's what you want to have happen. You want to be fumbling around trying to see which one of the giants was it with the 72 or the 43, the 41 hit point. Like, I just make them all the same. I mean, you'll see that in my sheet. Some people disagree with that, but like my frost giants, they're all 80 hit points. I use max hit points for players, max hit points for monsters. I don't have a 42 and a 41 and a 54. Even though it's technically not by the book, and a lot of people don't like that, it gives too much RNG for me. I like them to have the most heroic enemies possible against the most heroic players possible, to have more long, drawn-out confrontations where they can use all their abilities and not be like, oh, this one hill giant got in my face, but I two-shotted him. And the next guy came along, it took 7 shots to kill him. Anyway, that's all kind of my personal twist on that stuff. Hope it helps. Maybe gives you some cool ideas of what you can do when you're running your campaign and when you're trying to set things up. And even if you're using something like one of these old school things, right? What do you got to do to get the best of the best out of something that's so old like this to create a really dramatic, awesome, fun fight scene for your players? And good Lord, once all that's done, then they got to investigate the room and find traps and look for puzzles, and who knows what the kind of monkey business is going to happen. All right, we'll wind that up there, and we'll talk to you again real soon. If you got any ideas for something you'd like to hear more about, want to hear my perspective on it or my ideas on it, on the stuff that we used to do a long time ago when we were kids, I'd be happy to share it with you. And share the channel with people, like, subscribe, all that kind of business. And sounds awesome. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.